It's time for story time.
Welcome, everyone. Let the story time begin. Welcome, everyone, and thank you for joining me for It's Time for Story Time. Today's fairy tale will be How the Rhinoceros Got His Skin. And then let the story time begin. How the Rhinoceros Got His Skin. Long ago, among the tall trees near the shores of the Red Sea, lived a very rude rhinoceros. He had no manners then, and he has no manners now. You could recognize him by the horn on his nose, but in those days his skin was smooth and tight, and there wasn't a wrinkle in sight. He had 3 buttons on his tummy, which made it look like he was wearing a well-fitted jacket. One day, as Rhinoceros was searching for food, a traveler arrived on the beach and decided to bake a cake in his little oven. He sang to himself as he mixed flour and water, and currants and plums, and lots of sugar. Happy with his mixture, he popped it into the oven while he dozed under the burning sun. Soon, the sweet smell of cake filled the air. "Delicious," smiled the traveler when the cake was ready. In the nearby woods, Rhinoceros suddenly stopped in his tracks and lifted his head. And he sniffed and sniffed. "Cake," he snorted as the warm smell wafted above his horn. Then he followed his nose and headed for the beach. When the polite traveler saw him coming, he said, "Good morning." But the rude creature didn't even grunt. Instead, he charged ahead, knocking the cake out of the traveler's hands. Then he spiked the cake with his horn and lumbered back to his home. There he laid in the shade, enjoying every crumb. Meanwhile, the traveler was in a palm tree, and he was thinking and planning. "Just wait," he muttered. "I'll teach that rhino a lesson." A few weeks later, when searing heat prompted everyone to take to the sea, the traveler knew the time had come. He was sitting on the beach, wearing his hat to screen him from the ferocious sun, when he spied Rhinoceros. His eyes followed the creature as he heaved his great body along the sand. Not noticing the traveler, Rhinoceros finally stopped. Rhinoceros slowly undid his 3 buttons, took off his skin, and carried it over his shoulder as he went down into the sea to bathe. Leaving his skin at the edge of the water, he waddled into the sea. The traveler immediately jumped up. He danced around the skin and rubbed his hands with glee. "I'm ready," the traveler cried. "Just you wait and see." Then he set back off to his camp. As the traveler, who only ever ate cake and rarely ever cleaned up, there were plenty of crumbs all around his camp. "Lots of crumbs, crumbly crumbs," he sang as he quickly filled his hat with the stale cake crumbs. Then he raced back to the beach. Picking up the skin of the rhinoceros, the traveler sprinkled inside the lots of dirty, tickly cake crumbs and some baked currants. Then he left the skin for the rhinoceros. Then he climbed to the top of the palm tree, and there he waited. Rhinoceros took his time in the sea, laid on his back, and he blew bubbles, in through his nose. He splashed and never caring about the others that were in the water. Finally, as his great tummy started to rumble, and feeling much cooler as he swam, Rhinoceros returned to the beach. Thinking about what he was going to eat, Rhinoceros picked up his skin and buttoned it up. No sooner had he finished closing that last button than the crumbs began to itch. He wriggled and wriggled. He began to scratch, but that only made it worse. Ow! Ow! He cried loudly. Then he lay down on the sand and rolled and rolled and rolled. But every time he rolled, the cake crumbs dug into him, making it more and more uncomfortable. He was beginning to feel very hot again and very, very crabby. He lumbered up against the palm tree and rubbed himself and the trunk against the trunk. But still, the itching continued. He pressed his shoulders so hard against the tree that he rubbed his skin into a great fold. Then his legs started to itch, so he rubbed them up and down the tree until folds appeared on both legs. Now he was feeling very tired, and he was pressing his itchy tummy against the tree. He rubbed off every button. Finally, a huge fold of skin appeared across his tummy. The traveler looked down from the palm tree, watching his plan working. The rhinoceros became more and more bad-tempered as the cake crumbs continued to itch and scratch. Feeling exhausted and very angry, Rhinoceros finally gave up and he headed back home. And from this day, every rhinoceros has great folds in his skin and a very bad temper, all because of the cake crumbs inside. The end. Thank you for joining me on It's Time for Story Time.
You did a great job with reading today. Remember to like, subscribe, and hit the bell to be notified of new books weekly.